Darwin Platform Group of Companies is one of the fastest growing diversified Indian conglomerates with global footprints. It is setting up offices globally and tying up with companies across the globe from multiple sectors. The company has ventured into real estate and construction, stockbroking and finance, arms and ammunition, mining, airlines and many other sectors.
Hello and welcome to Business Today Television. I'm Siddharth Zarabi and you're watching Easynomics. The 47th meeting of the Monetary Policy Committee was held earlier this month. That meeting saw Professor Jayanth R, Verma, an external member of this very important panel, vote for a 25 basis points rate cut and a change in the stance to neutral. He was the only one of the 6-member panel to do so. Professor Verma now joins me to discuss the rationale behind his vote. Welcome to the show, Professor Verma. Thank you very much for your time with us today. Let me begin by asking you, why did you propose cutting the policy rate and a change in the stance?
Yeah, so the logic was that inflation has been coming down and is projected to come down a lot more over the next year or so. So the projected inflation for 2024-25 is an average of only 4.5%. And the current repo rate is 6.5%. So the interest rate is 2% more than the projected inflation for the coming year. And I believe that we do not need such a high real interest rate.
Professor Verma, Professor Verma, what are the factors, because I have read your statement, and just for the viewers as well to add to that, you said, and that point you just made, I do not believe that such a high real rate is required at this stage to drive inflation down to the target of 4%. You also said, sir, that it is true that economic growth is holding up well, but there is no evidence at all that the economy is overheating. Could you expand on that part of your statement?
Yeah, so the question is, when do you need a very high interest rate? You need a high interest rate either when inflation is running very, very high and it is not coming down. That's really not the case because inflation is projected to come down to 4.5%. The other situation where you might want to push up interest rates is if the economy is overheating, that it is growing too fast beyond its potential. So if an economy is capable of growing at only 8 and you try to make the economy grow at 9 or 10, instead of growing at 9 or 10, it will possibly end up in inflation. So we are projecting an economic growth of around 7%, which is that is what's been projected for 2025. 2024-25 might be 6%, might be 6.5%, might be 7%, something in that neighborhood, which is certainly well within the potential of the economy. Indian economy is probably capable of growing at more than 7. It's capable of growing more at even 8% without producing big inflationary pressures. So the economy is growing only within its potential. Inflation is coming down. Then we don't need 2%. Something like 1 to 1.5 should be adequate.
Would that imply, Professor Verma, when you say 1 or 1.5%, that is the extent of cuts that need to be obviously done in a staggered manner? Is that the right way to understand that part of your statement?
Yes, that if inflation keeps coming down the way it's being projected, then we will need to keep cutting because the target for the interest rate is always a real rate and not a nominal rate. So it's not that I want to keep interest rate at 6.5% until inflation gets 4%. That's not the way it works. What you do is that you have a target real rate and you say that, I want to target 1%, 1.5% real. And then as inflation keeps coming down, you bring the nominal rate down so that the real interest rate remains at the same level. So that's how monetary policy works. That your interest rate must exceed inflation. It must exceed inflation by a sufficient margin to keep bringing inflation down to target. So right now, inflation is still above target. Even 24-25, it will be above target because our target is 4. Even 24-25 will be 4.5. So it's above target. We need a high rate to drive inflation towards the target. Now, the definition of a high rate is a high real rate. So as inflation comes down, you would have to keep calibrating the nominal rate downward and maintain that spread above inflation at a stable level until inflation comes down to target, and then you can lower it even further.
A closer reading of the minutes of the recent meeting that has been released seems to suggest, Professor Verma, that there are some worries that a cut at this stage could undo the gains that have been made in the fight against inflation, and we have seen those successive raises that have happened. Is that a view that you concur with?
No, I don't think that cutting rate would undo this. We are not cutting the real rate at all. In fact, the real rate was very, very low when we began this process. So if inflation was, at a point, inflation was running at it crossed 6% for 3 quarters at a time. So when inflation was running at 6% and was projected to run at 6%, then 6.5% repo rate was only 0.5% real. And what has happened over a period of time without ever changing the repo rate is that 0.5% real has climbed to 2% real. So what has been happening is that as inflation kept coming down, the real rate kept going up, and it went beyond what it should be going, and therefore we are bringing it down. So I want to emphasize that even after a cut of 25 basis points that I proposed, monetary policy would still be very restrictive. We will be talking about 1.75% real, which is a restrictive policy which would still keep pushing inflation down. And there is no question that the goal is the target of 4. The question is, what rate do you need to get inflation down to the target of 4? And I think about 1.5% real would be adequate for that.
Professor Verma, has the task of restoring price stability been achieved? You're part of the MPC and therefore also part of that task. And do you think that there could be any risk to the outlook, especially as we go down the year?
Well, first of all, the target of 4 has not been achieved, right? Even projections are talking about 4.5. So we are not at a target. So there is still work to be done, which is why I am emphasizing that the real rate has to remain sufficiently positive to continue that disinflationary momentum. And we are projecting 4.5 for 24-25. Early part of 25-26, one would like it to come down to the target of 4. So the war is not over. The question is how intense should that war be, and I'm saying 1.5. What are the sins in which? What is the progress that we have made? Well, we haven't hit the target, but we are now well within the tolerance band. The tolerance band allows 2% up and down. So 4 plus 2 gives you 6. We are now well within that target, and all projections are that we will remain within that target. So that's the progress that has been achieved. But there is still a lot of work to be done. We will probably need another year or more of restrictive policy to get it down to 4. What are the risks? Yes, risks are there on both sides. The MPC itself believes that and this is the whole MPC, the majority MPC's projections, that the risks are balanced on both sides. That's what the minutes say. It's not my view that risks are balanced. It is the MPC's view that the risks are balanced on both sides. If the projection is 4.5, it could be more than 4.5, it could be less than 4.5. We could be lucky and we could hit 4. That's possible. We might be unlucky and we might hit 5 instead of 4.5. Both possibilities are there. But I don't think that there is a serious risk that it would now cross the upper tolerance band. That risk I think is quite remote at this stage.
Uh, Professor Verma, this question is for the understanding of those who may not follow this subject very closely. In other words, are you therefore saying that the glide path as far as inflation control needs to be a softer glide path rather than the steep path that the RBI, the MPC was forced to adopt or adopted some time ago?
Yes. So when inflation was raging very high after the Ukraine war, and it crossed the upper tolerance band, the urgency of bringing it within the band was obviously much greater. And the willingness to make growth sacrifices to bring it within the band was also there. And that is what we were focused on at that point of time. Now, when you say that the projection is 4.5 and our target is 4, what you're saying is that we are 0.5% above target. Now, that final 0.5% has to be achieved, but that final 0.5% does not need excessive growth sacrifices. The urgency of doing that is also lower. We have to balance the growth sacrifice and balance the inflation. So the closer you are to target, the more relaxed you can be about the glide path and the time horizon to do that, because you're only marginally above target. So that is the sense in which the glide path can be a little slower. And even the majority of the MPC is not expecting 4 to happen in 24-25. So the glide path is anyway, probably 18 months and not 12 months. So that is probably common to both sides. The majority also expects well more than a year for it to happen. The disagreement is what is needed to reach 4 over that 12 to 18 month rise. And I think that even with a cut of 25, we will still achieve that.
Professor Verma, is there an excessive focus on food price inflation vis-a-vis the cost of capital for the industrial sector? And I ask this from the point of view of the fact that government support at the center and state level for those who are at the margins and need support has consistently gone up in the past several years, sir.
Well, you see, food price dominates the headlines and it causes a lot of volatility. But what we have been observing over last several quarters is that spikes in food price inflation tend to be transient. So you get 1 or 2 months of very high inflation and then the price corrects automatically. So tomato price goes through the roof and a couple of months later a new harvest comes in and the price normalizes. So what has happened because of the tight monetary policy that has been running and the credibility of the inflation targeting central bank, what has happened is that those spikes in food prices do not lead to generalized inflation. So all that happens is the tomato price goes up, other vegetable price goes up, but prices of other goods do not go up. And what we have been seeing in the last several months is that core inflation has actually been moderating. And it has moderated very substantially. So what has been accomplished is that other than food, everything else is, there is no second round transmission. What we worry about as monetary policy is that if food price goes up, then do all prices ratchet up in response? That, okay, food price has gone up, therefore I should increase the price of everything else. Wages should go up because food price has gone up. Because wages has gone up, my cost has gone up, therefore I must increase my output prices. And it bleeds into generalized inflation. Now, what we have observed over the last several months is that this has not happened. food price inflation has remained confined to food. And therefore, when a new harvest comes in and there is adequate supply, the food price normalizes and non-food remains on its glide path downward. So that gives a lot of comfort that food prices will be volatile. They will go up, but as they go up, they will come down as well. So without generalizing into non-food inflation. That is the source of comfort that's there on food based on the last several quarters of experience. But the fact remains, the statutory mandate for the MPC is headline CPI inflation. Our target is 4% CPI inflation, which includes a very large fruit basket. Our mandate is to deliver 4% for headline CPI inflation, which includes food, non-food, and so on. And that is the mandate. We have no choice on that. We are statutorily bound to obey that mandate. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. No, I can't hear you. What has happened?
I wonder if you can hear me now, sir?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. Professor Verma, I want you to explain to our viewers another part of your statement where you say perhaps the majority of the MPC worry that the output gap has already closed and that the projected growth rate of 7% for FY25 exceeds the growth potential of the Indian economy. I do not think that such growth pessimism is warranted. My question is there pessimism really, sir?
Yeah. You see, think about this. We know that in the pandemic, there was a big, negative growth and so on. So let us look at pre-pandemic. Let's look at 2019-20 and look at the year that is now coming to an end, which is 23-24, and ask how much has the economy grown over this period? 4 years, right? So that includes the very bad year of the pandemic and it includes the recovery from the pandemic. Over this 4-year period, how fast has the Indian economy grown? And the answer is that the average growth rate, annual growth rate has been 4.25%. Now, which is far below what we would aspire for as an economy. We would like to get to 7-8% growth. We have got only 4.25% for the last 4 years. So my view is that there is pent-up growth potential. We have grown below our potential for 4 years because of the pandemic. We should now try to catch up. Okay? And even the 7% growth that is projected for 24-25 is, I believe, well within the potential of the economy. Now, when people say that growth is robust and therefore what is the need to cut rates? I think we must think about robust growth that way. Is 4.25% over 4 years what we think is robust? I think the economy is capable of growing much faster. I think it is, I said in my minutes that, and I've stated elsewhere that our growth rate looks quite good compared to the rest of the world. We are growing faster. We are the fastest growing large economy in the world. All that is true. But my point is we are capable of growing even faster. And we owe it to the people of India to deliver the fastest growth that is possible without the economy overheating, without inflation getting out of hand. So we should not get worried, 7% growth, it is time to cool the economy and so on. 7%, we don't need to cool the economy. 7%, we need to see that growth. We need to see whether we can step it up to 7.5, step it up to 8. We need that because, we are still a poor country. The economy needs all the growth that it can get. And we should get worried that 7% is overheating. 7% is definitely not.
7% is definitely not overheating. One final question, Professor Verma, and I take you back to your previous answer where you said that obviously the MPC has to obey the mandate. Is it time to relook the mandate? Because when the mandate was fixed, the economy was in a certain size and shape, and economies change, and therefore in the real world, mandates could or should also change. Is that a view that you would concur with?
I don't think so. You see, the way I look at it is that every price index has limitations. So the wholesale price index measures one thing, the consumer price index measures something else, the GDP deflator measures something else. They're all closely related, but they're all different. And, to say that, one measure is better than another measure and so on, it's very difficult to say that. And so that's one part of it, that every measure is going to be imperfect in some way. And one shouldn't get too worried that, this is the consumer CPI has so much of food and therefore it is volatile and so on. If you put in something else, it will have its own flaws. That's one way to answer that question. The other way to answer that question is that I would say that, when the government of India sets gives the target, that this is the target for the MPC, I think the MPC, should refrain from, challenging that and saying you are measuring us the wrong way and so on. Okay, there's a target that has been given to us. That's a reasonable target. We should not be saying, please give us another target. That is, that would be like the student telling the teacher, you've sent a wrong question paper. Can I have a different question paper? That's not the way. That's not the way the MPC should behave. We have given a target. We should accept that. We should try and deliver on that.
Absolutely.
Any target would have its own flaws and limitations.
Absolutely. No question of changing the question paper and certainly not cheating or fudging around it. Professor Verma, as always, a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for explaining your most recent statement and looking forward to your continuing contributions to India's monetary policy. Thank you very much. With that, it's a wrap on this episode of Easynomics. We'll be back with more. Do stay tuned in. Bye-bye.
Darwin Platform Group of Companies is one of the fastest growing diversified Indian conglomerates with global footprints. It is setting up offices globally and tying up with companies across the globe from multiple sectors. The company has ventured into real estate and construction, stockbroking and finance, arms and ammunition, mining, airlines, and many other sectors.
It's truly amazing that when you change the mind, or rather the mindset, how things move.